After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude, which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, with palm branches in their hands. So, after seeing the chosen few from the 12 tribes, now I want to make something clear also. Not only those Colossians and Romans and Galatians tell us that in Yahushua there is no Greek nor Yahudi, meaning there is no chosen nation nor Gentile. For in Yahushua we are one with him, and he was a Yahudi, therefore a Gentile within the spirit of Yahushua becomes a Yahudi. That's why there also it is written, there is no male nor female, for we are all one. That one is Mashiach, Yahushua. That's why he is the true vine. He is the root. We all must be connected to him no matter who we are, where we come from. So, also besides that, when it comes to the people of Israel, the true people of Israel, not those who are called Jews nowadays, of whom many are Khazars and others are Edomites, and very few are true Israelites, but the main group of Israelites in the world is not known as Israelites. The greater part of the true people of Yahweh, the Israelites, are seen nowadays as Gentiles, which was prophesied in, well, many parts of scriptures, but mainly Deuteronomy. But that because of our sins we would be scattered throughout the earth, and with the with the decades and even centuries, we would forget our true identity. Our parents would forget it, and then they would not teach it to us. Instead, they would teach us what they were taught, and that's why they were all born within the apostasy, the rebellion. So the greater part of Israel is seen as Gentiles nowadays. They are filling the nations, as it is written also in scriptures. So I want to make that clear. For when the 144,000 are chosen from the 12 tribes, and eventually when the world realizes who they are, the world, the nations, will be surprised, for they will think they were Gentiles. They will be surprised of who are the people that Yahweh will choose. And also another, I think, obvious point that confirms what I'm saying, obviously if you believe in scriptures, is that the Almighty told Abraham that not only Abraham, Jacob and Yitzhak, that his children will be multiplied like the stars of the heavens and like the sand by the sea, that it cannot be counted for how many there are. But nowadays you can, well, they say you can search and see how many Jewish people there are, and there are very, very few in comparison to the other nations. That shows that they are not the true descendants, for if they were, there would be millions of them, making it impossible to be counted. However, nowadays all of them are as Gentiles, so they are not counted as Israelites. They are counted as part of those nations in which they are living at the moment, for they were scattered there. So Israel would be like the stars of the heaven, like the sand of the sea in number, and that promise would be fulfilled, at least in part, at the very least, I repeat, in part, at the end times. For then we have the next life in which Yahweh will allow us to multiply, but that will be a different reality in all sorts of ways. Therefore, his promise of Yaakov multiplying like the sand of the sea would be fulfilled in this reality. So before this reality ends, we would be already that many. So that means we are that many already, yet we don't know who we are, for they lied to us and programmed us to believe we were Gentiles. Verse 9, after these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude. This great multitude are the many, what I call the earth, according to the verses that we read first. The earth, the sea, and the trees. The 144,000 are the trees, for they have the seal on their foreheads. That's why they cannot be hurt by those spirits, for the spirits were not given authority over the trees, only over the earth and the sea. Earth and the sea, the many who believe, and the nations who do not believe. So here we are seeing the many. That's why they are called the great multitude. After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one could number, of all nations, no one could number, like the promise given to Jacob, like the sand of the sea that no one can number, like the stars in the heavens that no one can number. This is very important. I look, and behold, a great multitude which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. Before the throne and before the Lamb. This is interesting because, as I explained in other chapters, Yahuhanan was not seeing Yahushua himself, the one he was walking with when he manifested. He was seeing a lamb. So he writes the Lamb. We understand whom is referring to, whom Yahweh is referring to, for Yahushua is called the Lamb. Plus the elder in the previous chapters said that is the lion of the tribe of Yehudah and other things. So even though it's the lamb, the elder calls him the lion because he is the one that would come from Yehudah, Yahushua HaMashiach. So the fact that it says standing before the throne and before the Lamb is interesting because the throne represents the second manifestation, who comes as king. That's why he's the throne, for the presence of the Almighty sits on him, rests on him. Like when a king sits on the throne, he rests on the throne. So the throne is the last, as the Ark of the Covenant, the last. Yahushua is the Lamb here, and when it comes to the relation to the Ark of the Covenant, Yahushua is the temple. That's why he said, destroy the temple and I will raise it up in 3 days. So the temple and the ark are two key parts of the revelation of the Almighty on this reality, and at least two objects. They were material things that represented something greater. The temple represented the Messiah and the congregation, that is the body of Messiah. And the Ark of the Covenant represents the second manifestation coming as the king of that congregation, who are the temple. That's why the ark would be in the most set apart place, what they call Holy of Holies. It would be in the most set apart place, being the throne where the presence of Yahweh would rest when the high priest would enter. So that's why they were right before the throne and the Lamb, last and first, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes. This is interesting. White robes. We see eventually in Revelation 19 that the bride of Messiah is dressed in fine linen. In Revelation 19:13, it says he was clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of Yahweh. Well, that was the one I mentioned regarding the name. And then it says, and the armies in heaven clothed in fine linen. Clothed in fine linen, the armies of heaven. If we go to verse 9, some verses before that, verse 8, in verse 8 we read that it says, and to her, the congregation, the bride for the wedding of the Lamb, and to her it was granted to be arrayed in fine linen. So fine linen is something greater than just white robes. To her it was granted, she is given something special, which is to be arrayed in fine linen. Fine linen is the name given in scripture spiritually to the bodies of the chosen few. For the clothing is to the body as the body is to the soul. So the fine linen that will be the clothing of the chosen few are actually their bodies, which will be greater than the bodies of the many. So reality will be experienced a little bit different by the few than by the many. That's why the few, as the bride, are granted to be arrayed in fine linen, which is the body that is received by those who do not die and become kings, who become the bride of the Messiah. As the bride normally is dressed in the best way possible and better than every other person that is invited to the wedding. So the bride is the congregation, the chosen congregation, the 144,000, Philadelphia of Revelation 3. And the people that are invited are the many. So the bride is dressed in fine linen, the many are dressed in white robes. So white robes are given to those who are justified, the many who died and then are resurrected. They are given perfect bodies without the inclination to do evil. That's why they are white robes. They are the chosen people now. But the few are given to become the bride, are given fine linen. So, and to her it was granted to be arrayed in fine linen, clean and bright. For the fine linen is the righteous acts of the set apart ones, the chosen few who are set apart from this world during the transformation, set apart from the rebellion, set apart from dying. And they then become the army of the heavens. That's why they come with the Messiah to fight in the war of Armageddon, as we see in the verse that I read first, 14. And the armies in heaven clothed in fine linen. We just saw that the bride is the one clothed in fine linen. So it is the bride as the chosen few, now the army coming with Messiah to destroy the enemy. So, going back to Revelation 7. After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one could number. I repeat, like the sand of the sea, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. It is interesting that scripture says that the beast will mark everybody of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues. In the sixth seal we read that peoples from all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues will hide. We see how Yahweh gives honor to those people from those same places and same tongues and everything, who remain at least set apart from the unbelievers, from those who hate Yahweh, from those who love the beast and what the beast will bring as what they call the New World Order. My point is that several words are used just like they are used when it comes to those who will be lost in the lake of fire because of the mark of the beast. Yet instead these are the ones who will reject the mark of the beast when it is too late, and that's why they have to die. But they will be willing to die at that moment, and because of that willingness they will receive justification and white robes. So it says, no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes. So these are the many who have to die, who are justified. Martyrs are also given white robes, for they give their lives just like the many will have to give their lives for not accepting the mark of the beast. So that's why they receive white robes. Clothed with white robes, with palm branches in their hands. With palm branches in their hands. This is connected to a couple things. Clothed with white robes, with palm branches in their hands. Those palm branches are connected to a couple things in scriptures. One, when Messiah was entering Jerusalem, they brought palm branches, threw them on the floor to give entrance to the Messiah into Jerusalem as king, and they were hailing him as son of David, saying, Hoshiana, Hoshiana, save us, O King, son of David. So here we see something similar, but in the heavens. One's the many, the multitude, When Yahushua entered Jerusalem on a donkey, there was a multitude calling him Messiah. But they were despised at that moment by the Pharisees for saying those things. They were also influenced by the Pharisees in order for Messiah to be sacrificed days later. So days later, they were asking whom should they free, either Yahushua or Barabbas, and they asked to sacrifice Yahushua. The multitude asked to sacrifice Yahushua days after they were calling him Messiah. Obviously, not necessarily was the same people. Like, they were not necessarily the same people. Obviously, both multitudes, but great part of those multitudes were obviously the same, yet they changed their mind in a matter of days because of what the Pharisees said. So that will happen also with the two witnesses. There will be some people who will accept them, but when the media starts to lie about them and try to destroy their character when it comes to the way people will see them and everything, some will turn away from their belief, from their teaching, and will actually decide to sacrifice them, as the multitude did in the time of Yahushua days later, from taking palm branches and throwing them on the floor and calling him king. So now we see that same action, but by those people who now have no doubt of who is the true Messiah, for they had to die for it, for that knowledge. Not for him, for he died for them, but they did not accept the way he wanted things to be accepted, and therefore they had to pay when it comes to the body. For the payment of sin is death. Yahushua paid for the sin that would take us to hell. But since, well, I want to explain this in a little bit better way. First and last would come for the soul and the body. Since the many only accept the first, they will be resurrected once they give their bodies up. For because of some of their sins, they should lose their bodies. When the last comes, since the chosen few will accept the doctrine of the last, who teaches of the first, the true first, who is Yahushua, then they will have soul and body, and that's why they won't experience death. They will be transformed in the blink of an eye. Yahushua came for the soul, the last comes for the earth. And since the human's body was made from the dust, that is why the last is connected to the body. So only those who accept the two witnesses, the last and his sacrifice, only they will be transformed without dying. Hope that's clear. So now the many will have to die to pay for their rebellion, a part of the sin that causes death. But their spiritual death, the death of their soul, won't happen, for they accepted the Messiah, his death and resurrection, even if they did not know or accept his name. For by that time when they died, they would know the name, but they had not accepted it by that moment. So the few will have the name on their foreheads. They are transformed in the blink of an eye. The many will reject the name until it is too late, after the death of the two witnesses. And when the beast presents the image of the beast, which will be the abomination of desolation, the false Messiah, the Antichrist, the false Messiah, will tell everybody to get the mark. He won't tell them that it is a mark. He won't call it the mark of the beast. He will convince them to get something in order to be connected to him. And well, he may not say that either, but that's what he's going to do it. The reason that, well, there are many reasons really, but one of the reasons for which he is doing the mark of the beast is so that the mark of the beast will be as the spirit. For we know that he is not omnipresent. He cannot, the enemy cannot be everywhere at once, and he cannot be within every person that may accept him. So he has to create something through technology in order to control every person and be inside every person, as the spirit of Yahweh is within every person who believes in Messiah. So Satan needs the mark of the beast in order to be inside and control every person. So The mark of the beast will be presented to the people days after the death of the two witnesses. Days after the death of the two witnesses, the beast will present the abomination of desolation, and the abomination of desolation will present the mark of the beast. People will start getting it like crazy, and they will start forcing people to get it if they want to remain in this world, in the new world order. So that's when the many will realize that the two witnesses were right, and that's when they will have to make their choice. Either they accept the mark of the beast and end up being condemned to the lake of fire, or they reject it and have to die at that moment, but will be resurrected and justified. These are the people who are justified. So I continue reading. Clothed with white robes with palm branches on their hands. So we see that they are having palm branches, as in accepting the kingdom of the true Elohim, of Yahweh, through his Messiah, first and last. That's why they are before the throne and the Lamb. And they have palm branches. The other connection with those palm branches are the palm branches, or the tree branches that were used for the feast of Sukkot. The two witnesses will be killed on Yom Kippur. They will be resurrected 3.5 days later. Then 1 day and a half later comes the feast of Sukkot, when Yahweh told Israel to get branches to build Sukkot, places where they could stay for a while to represent the Exodus. So that shows that the second Exodus will begin on Sukkot, the 15th of the 7th month. And that is the moment when the 30 days begin, the 30 days of Hosea 5:7, in which the multitude will die, the Great Tribulation. So Sukkot pretty much marks the beginning of the second Exodus, in which many will die. And they brought palm branches, as showing the connection with the branches of Sukkot.